hello everyone, and welcome to our Inclusion and Wellbeing Forum. The usual forum decorum applies. We'll ask everyone to mute their mics, please. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Myself and Susie will monitor the chat, and we can address any of your questions to Ashley toward the end of the session. Please keep it focused on students. We try not to talk about individual situations in schools, and we are not affiliated with anyone. We are all voluntary, all free, and nobody's an absolute expert. We share, we collaborate, and we're learning from each other. So if you have something that you think is really useful information, please do share. And I've just seen in the chat, somebody's asking, can you get the recording? If you would like to get a copy of the recording, please do email me, and I've put my email in the chat. Don't put your email in the chat, just pop me an email and I'll add you to our email list. So Susie, would you like to introduce our wonderful speaker today?
Yes, it's an honor to introduce you to Ashley Green. She's originally from Dubai, from Scotland, and moved to Dubai 10 years ago. She's been full-time, spent 6 years teaching in the primary school. She's also achieved recently a master's degree in positive psychology and coaching. And she's passionate about the well-being and mental health of children and those who care for them. She's created many resources for educators and parents to share with children to encourage them to flourish. She's recently published a children's book which focuses on supporting children to discuss feelings and emotions. Please buy it. Find her brand new online well-being course through her website, where you can support your well-being through positive psychology. Ashley believes that the absence of mental illness is not conducive for wellness. Everyone can go beyond and flourish in life. Totally true. Back to you, Ashley. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks, Susie. That was so kind of you to. I realise now I've sent you a bio and I've put so many things in it, but thanks so much for having me. You know, I really love the whole ethos of this forum. You know, people coming together with inclusion and well-being. It's lovely, and we're all here for the common goal. So I'm really grateful that you've asked me along to just chat about some of the things that I've been doing. And hopefully there's some value there. And I really look forward to hearing about all the things that happen in your schools. Because again, it's like Catherine said and Susan mentioned, the more that we share, the better it is for everybody. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with you all. So if I can just move on to the next slide, Catherine, please. Thanks so much. I always include this slide at the beginning of a talk that I do, just to kind of give everybody an idea of the journey, how I got to here. So like Susie mentioned, I'm a teacher and I've taught in Dubai now for 11 years. Always originally from Scotland, I taught there for a couple of years, but always had a huge interest in pastoral care, as it was called in Scotland, and PSHE programs. It was always something that I really found valuable, you know. Then more recently did a master's in positive psychology and coaching, because having lived in Dubai so long, I think it was maybe around 8 or 9 years ago, I realised that I needed to do things to support my own mental health. Being a teacher, all my family being in the UK, struggling with certain things, you know, so then I thought, right, I need to have a look at how I can improve my own mental well-being. So I did visit professional services here, but then that's what led me eventually to mindfulness, which is something that I started about 6-7 years ago, mindfulness practice. And then I had a real light bulb moment of, gosh, why aren't we teaching children these things in school? And so that was a thought that many other people have had, and obviously you all have as well. And then that's when I started meeting more people. So that kind of led me on to the Masters of Positive Psychology and Coaching, because I thought I want to learn more about psychology science and how I can bring that to education, you know, because it's something to me that it just is important as academics are. It's just a really brief introduction about how I came to find this journey of well-being and become a total advocate for it in primary schools especially.
Sorry, Ashley, sorry to interrupt you. Could you speak up a little bit? We're having a couple of people are asking you to maybe move closer.
Sorry,
Thank
I think
you.
it's this big computer. Normally I do talks from my laptop at home. Is that a bit better? Yeah, sorry. Okay, if I could just move on to the next slide, please. Thanks so much. So what might we get from today? Like Catherine said, we're not all experts, you know, as in we've all got our knowledge and understanding in certain things that we can share. So I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any stretch, but what I love to do is, you know, share the things that I have learned about and the things that I've been implementing in my own practice. So what might you get from today? A brief insight into my research on thriving teachers. So I know that many of us here are teachers, but there's also other departments. But for me, it kind of connects itself to education staff, you know, so this was the culmination of my master's thesis. And I just thought there's a lot of conversation about well-being in education for the children, but actually this can't be taught to the children without considering educational staff first, so that they experience it. You know, they've got a better idea of how to implement practices for the children successfully, have an understanding the science behind it. So I want to just mention a couple of things that are interesting about that research. Then I'll share 5 ways to improve your overall well-being that are all rooted in positive psychology science, and then how we can translate the experiences that we have in certain areas of well-being for students in our care. Thank you. So this, I'll just give you a minute to kind of have a look at the thought cloud, the word cloud. When I did the research into thriving teachers, the teachers that I interviewed reported through the KHDA Adults at School survey as thriving. So I was really interested to speak to them as in what makes you thrive, you know, so that other teachers can learn from that, because there was something like 7 or 8% were really struggling, a big chunk were just getting by. And when you look at that data, you think, you know, the smaller portion is thriving. So why is that? So when you look at all these words, basically the interviews were an hour long. I analysed all the data using different programmes and a really long time to read through the transcriptions line by line. And once I recorded it all, these are the words that come out. So if you look for someone who's in education, who's thriving, one of the big words in the middle is relationships. So again, you relate that back to this year particularly. This is all done before COVID, this research. You know, I'd be really interested to now look at it again, having had the year that we've all had. But relationships is at the centre point, you know, and that's relationships between colleagues are essential for well-being and thriving. Good relationships with students. So other words around about which are really important are trust, leadership, reflection, respect. So again, you can see that this, when you look at all these words, it is really easy to connect them to well-being and someone who's well. So it would be interesting to see a study on the opposite side of someone who's really struggling with well-being. You know, what kind of things, words would come out in their word cloud, and how could we then support them? So if we move on, I can just show you, I mean, I can also send this PowerPoint to everyone, Catherine, if you like, just to kind of delve into it a bit deeper so that everyone can see it. But these 4 were the main master themes of a thriving educator. They had certain commonalities between their personalities, like they were aware of well-being and self-care. So all those teachers talked about these things as essential, you know, to their well-being, and they talked about different practices that they did. So it was a real awareness and a real really implementing it into their life in some way. The teachers were all reflective, so they spent time reflecting on situations, not all positive situations, but even when they reflected on perceived negative situations, it did support their well-being in a way they felt, because they were actually spending time thinking about things and finding pathways for themselves. Instead of letting it manifest as just anxiety and adding to stress, they actually picked it apart. And they had solution-focused attitudes. So it's quite often for us all, you know, when things are really tough, then we close our classroom door and have a moan with one of our colleagues and talk about, you know, this is hard and that's hard. But again, it's rather than focusing on the problems, it's having a look at the solutions was a really, they felt, benefit for them and supported them to be a thriving teacher. Again, like I mentioned before, the value of interpersonal relationships. So they had socializing was really important to them inside the workplace as well as outside the workplace. More so now, I would say, and myself included, because of lockdown and everything, actually isolated myself more. And I found it quite difficult at times to, you know, reintegrate back into doing social things because of the worry of COVID, you know, different things that play on your mind. Also, working in an educational environment, you want to make sure that you aren't putting anyone at any unnecessary risk by, you know, being too close to other groups of people. But again, socializing was definitely, or again, that part of relationships was really important to thrive in teachers. Mutual respect was another theme that came up. They talked a lot about respecting other people and obviously garnering respect from colleagues, which seems like a really obvious one, but actually when you look at it, certain situations that happen in work, if people are rushing around, people are stressed, sometimes it can be a bit short, you know, and it's really placing value in those relationships, and mutual respect was a huge thing that people felt was conducive to their well-being. And also, if you're familiar, which I'm sure you all will be, the 5 ways to well-being, one of them is giving. And again, that was something they found that not just, it's quite an altruistic job anyway, working within education. But they found that giving to other people in terms of time, giving support, you know, having a given aspect to their nature was conducive to helping them feel well. So it's again just something else to kind of be mindful. And I know I'm going through this quite quickly, but hopefully it's just things that you can note down and think about how it fits in your context. How, you know, if workshops can happen based on one of these types of things, if you think it's useful. The effects of leadership was a huge one. So I'm sure we've got some leaders here, school leaders. But what these thriving teachers felt like, they were really empowered in their workplace. So within their specific roles, they weren't all class teachers. There were some other leaders and things within the school environments they worked in. And they found that when their leaders empowered them, that really supported them to feel well. So this is a huge one for me, effects of leadership, because you can almost feel the energy of a school when you meet leadership teams and you know what kind of leadership style is there. And sometimes, you know, it isn't always the best leadership style in terms of staff well-being, you know, if there's a stressful atmosphere and things. So being really empowering and openness and approachability, being able to speak with people really helped them feel like they were thriving, and fostering equality. So that again is a huge one in so many ways. And the working environment, so the 3 main subordinate themes that came out of there was trust. So again, when you think about your context, you know, are you trusted to do your job? Do you feel psychologically safe? This, for me particularly, was a huge one because it's just so big. If you feel psychologically safe to take risks and improving and innovating things. So think about that in the flip side, how well-being can suffer if you don't feel psychologically safe, you know. So if you think about teachers or any educators or different departments within an educational organisation, think about the psychological safety. And if you are someone that feels like it's not a psychologically safe place, then how can you begin to improve that by, you know, who could you speak to? How could this be broached? How could this be improved in some way? And also all those thriving educators felt supported by colleagues, but also supported by leadership. So there's a huge amount in that study about teacher well-being and what is conducive to thriving. And these were my kind of findings. So to me, they're really valuable because it just gives me, at the time when I was actually doing the study, there's certain things I wouldn't have said I was thriving in. So even just reflecting on these points was really valuable. So actually, yeah, I've just made a YouTube video. It was like 17 minutes long, just kind of outlining my research if you're interested in it. I haven't had it published yet because basically COVID hit, and then the editor wanted me to do more interviews with people who thrived through COVID, and I thought I'm not even mentally prepared to begin any more research. So if you would be interested, this video, it's only 17 minutes long, but there's some more details there. So when you think about well-being in a school, and I'm sure everyone here thinks about these three areas: staff well-being, parental well-being, and of course student well-being. But very often pupils come first. You know, as soon as if I ever show my character strength cards to a school or a counsellor or inclusion team, the first thing people say is, oh, these are great for the kids. And I kind of laugh and think, yeah, they are great for the kids, but they're also great for you. You know, everything about positive psychology for me and positive education, or positive psychology in education, starts with the staff, you know, because you've all heard that phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't continuously give to children and colleagues and everything if your fuel is running low. And again, that analogy that we all love about being on the aeroplane, you know, you've got to put your own mask on first before you support someone else. So for me, it always begins with staff. And sometimes I do get kind of funny looks like, no, it's about the children, and it is about the children, but you will do them better justice if you care about your well-being and self-care as a priority. So for me, this little diagram just kind of connects them all. So yeah, these are, I'm sure lots of you have heard about positive psychology or positive education. There's a lot of big companies across the world that promote positive education, and some schools out here are actually now starting to have weekly lessons in different ways that they're bringing it in. But having spoken recently with a couple of my professors at university who are involved in coaching and education and things, kind of moving away from the term positive education, because it almost implies that education isn't already positive, which it is. You know, there's so much joy and so much goodness in education. So they're trying to consider it as positive psychology in education. And these are the main 5 things that I wanted to speak to you about today. And please feel free to jump in with any questions that you have, or if I talk too much about something in particular, because I want to just give as much value, but I don't want to go over things that you're probably already really au fait with. But these 5 pathways are emotions and feelings, character strengths, gratitude, creative well-being, and then I've got a few extra slides on mindfulness and meditation, because I know that's what lots of people also want to kind of talk more about. So I've basically got a couple of slides for each one, and then a few extra slides for mindfulness and meditation. So if that's okay, I can just share with you what I've got about those. So emotions and feelings, this one is just such a massive area. You know, we all know how we deal with things emotionally as a professional. We've all got our days that we're a bit more emotional than others, and we've got certain ways that we deal with it. We all know those people that bottle everything up and then they become like a coiled spring, and it all comes out in a different way. You know, I've definitely been one of those people who's closed the cupboard and had a cry in there, because I just, you know, you have to get it out sometimes. So emotions and feelings for me is a huge one. I just think, if now I'm an adult and I think about if I started primary school at 4, if I'd have been through an education system that taught me effectively about emotional literacy, how to manage emotions and self-regulate, what things could be different for me as an adult. But it's not to say that you can't start this journey of learning more now, you know. So for me, these are the 3 key points. Being aware of and regulating our feelings and emotions can lead to improved communication, relationships, and overall well-being. A lot of these themes are connected to mindfulness. So again, when I speak about that in a little while, the more that you practice mindfulness, you know, you live this awareness and you can check in with your feelings, you begin to notice them more regularly, and you can check in with them and decide how you feel, what you feel about that feeling, what to do next. There's a really lovely poem actually by Rumi called The Guest House. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but I would really recommend it. It's very short, but that for me describes feelings and emotions in such a lovely way, because it just says welcome them all in. So you don't negate any emotions that you perceive to be negative, because they also have power and value. This is what my second point was, sorry, power and negative emotions. Because the way I kind of see it is you can't have light without darkness, you know, you can't have darkness without light. So in order to experience true joy and really feel it, one must know the feelings of sadness and different things. So really mindfulness and meditation, again, connect to emotions and feelings, but it's just something that you can do is, you know, sit with it for a while and decide, where are you in terms of emotions and feelings? How do you use them? How do you experience them personally, but how does it become involved professionally for you as well? And this book, I noticed that someone put in the chat, they're reading this book right now, but this Emotional Agility by Susan David is a fantastic book. I actually listened to it in Audible, and it's a really great one to listen to too. So that's definitely one I would recommend. So on the next slide, thinking about students then, like I mentioned before, I just am so passionate and believing that children need to begin this process really, really young, you know, from FS1, as soon as they come to nursery, and continue this journey all the way up to, you know, being an adult. So lots of us in this group here today will have experience with young children or students that, you know, have emotional regulation issues, or, you know, that don't express any emotion. There's such a range of it. And for me, this is why the rainbow is so valuable, because emotions to me are like rainbows. Every single colour is important to make up the vision of what a rainbow is. So if you think about developing that emotional literacy, how many children do we know, and also how many grown-ups who revert to happy or sad, you know? And there's like such a range of emotion words that we can begin providing them with, and even letting them express and articulate what their emotions are. You know, I've had really young children say, well, happiness feels like sunshine inside, it feels sunny, you know, and I'm like, if that's how they express it, then great, they're expressing it. So this is the book that I had written initially, because I just wanted teachers and parents to have a tool, and there's so many gorgeous books out there that you can use to open that dialogue, you know, and start having conversations about what the words are. How does that feel for you? And again, mindfully checking in. So when they do say, I feel sad, well, how does sad feel in your body? How does sad feel in your mind? Opening those conversations so that they can talk about these things. And again, that's creating a safe environment to talk about their inner landscape in school as well as at home. So the next thing, again, for me, mindfulness and meditation was always the main thing in my life that helped me keep balance. But once I started studying positive psychology, I came across the character strengths. And I don't know, I'm sure lots of you will be familiar with them, but the character strengths for me are just golden. You know, I just think, look at this scientifically crafted language that you can implement in the whole community. So when I go back to the students, staff and parents, character strengths is a language that everyone can use together. And it's the opposite of, you know, reactive to when something goes wrong for a person, including ourselves. Looking at the character strengths is discovering what's right with us. So we all have the 24 character strengths within us. And there's loads of information on the VIA character website. I can put the link in the chat. If you haven't already done the VIA character survey, I would do that, because it's so lovely to have this report of, it orders your strengths, and sometimes they're quite surprising. Like I had creativity at number 9, and I was shocked by that, you know, because I would think I was a creative person, but actually my number 1 strength was appreciation of beauty and excellence. That made total sense to me, because it's just something I've always felt I've had since being really young. So now when you look at the character strengths, you can begin applying them professionally and personally. So for example, if I'm focusing on the character strength of love, you know, and that's my focus for the week, and then a parent comes to the door and is really cross about something, you know, I can turn to that situation using my strength of love, begin thinking about empathy. You know, this parent wants the best for her child, so how can I be of service, you know, and let go the emotion side of things, you know. So anyway, character strengths are just something that are really fantastic. And also there are so many studies that talk about character strengths in terms of well-being. So there's been scientific studies carried out with specific patients who were suffering clinical depression, and they used one character strength in a different way each day for 7 days, and then they did various measurement scales and self-reports, and they felt that their symptoms had kind of alleviated. So, you know, there's a lot of scientific studies on in different ways how you can use character strengths to improve overall well-being. So it's definitely one worth looking at if you haven't already. And I would definitely recommend taking part in the character strength survey, because it's just really lovely to spend that time with yourself, first of all, doing something for you, and having a look at that report and thinking, right, how can I begin to use these strengths in different ways? And again, on the website, there are millions of ways that you can use them to support your well-being. Yeah. So then for students, like Susie mentioned at the beginning, for me, I thought, right, how can I get these character strengths into schools? How can we give teachers and students tangible resources that they can use to begin building this process of character strength education? So I have these character strength cards, and I've seen them used with really little children, you know, and they are kind of bendy, so they can squish them and, you know, like children do. But again, they've used them with some of the older kids. And then what's really nice is children begin to start talking about what they think their strengths are. Very often kids, when you say, tell me something you're good at, tell me what you're strong at, what's your strength? They'll say, I'm good at maths, or I'm really good at football. And they perceive that as their strength, which to an extent, of course it is. But what we really want the children talking about is, I'm a really good leader, or I'm very hopeful, I'm optimistic, or I'm grateful, you know. And you just think, if you begin that dialogue with them, and they go through an education system that includes and builds on this each year. Again, think of an adult coming out of the school at the opposite end that really holds strengths innately to who they are. And again, like I said, that's an ecology throughout the school. That's an easy place to start and build it from. So yeah, gratitude is a huge one for so many people. And I feel like the reason I included this is because, like I've said, it's the most robustly researched concept in positive psychology. There are so many interventions based on gratitude, and it's almost verging into the commercial thing. So you go to any supermarket now, you can see like mindful colouring books and things, but now we're starting to see gratitude journals. And what we need to be really careful about when we do gratitude practices for ourselves is that it doesn't just become a chore. You know, if you write down 3 things you're grateful for every day, I've done that for a really long time, but there are times that I know that it supports my well-being. It turns my thinking and reframes like a space that I'm in. But you need to be aware that if it's not working for you for a certain time, then there are other things you can do to practice gratitude. I should have put another book up here called Flourish by Martin Seligman. I don't know if I've seen it before, but I can put it in the chat as well. I'll forget all these things that I'm going to put in the chat, but I'll do it. Flourish by Martin Seligman. It outlines quite a lot of nice positive psychology interventions, including gratitude. So if you think about things like gratitude letters, you know, it was quite an emotional experience for me when I'd written a gratitude letter to my mum. And I thought, my mum knows I'm grateful for all the things that I do. You know, I'm grateful for her and who she is. But when I actually sat and wrote the letter and really came out and sent it to her, you know, for both of us, that was a really lovely thing. And how well that we both felt after it. That's a short-lived, momentary intervention, but the effects of it can last a really long time. So during the more difficult times for educators, then of course we're snowed under with all sorts of things, but actually carving out some time to practice gratitude can be really beneficial for your well-being. And again, on the next slide, thanks Catherine, it's the same for students. So I'm pretty sure that everybody here has done gratitude activities for children, but again, it's easy to implement into every day, but it's another one that is really connected to mindfulness and character strengths. So the more that children practice mindfulness activities, but the more they develop a mindfulness practice, the more you talk about the strength of gratitude, it just becomes a bit more immersive for them, rather than just the small, let's quickly write down 3 things and we'll put it in a jar, which is a great activity to get them started and get the conversation going, but then it's building on that because they are very capable of understanding it on a deeper level. They really can. I often find that when you speak about gratitude, especially with really young children, you know, they've got it right. They know the big things to be grateful for, but they also really see the little things in life that are so lovely to be grateful for. So I won't talk too much about that for students because, again, I'm sure lots of you do many things already. So that'd be a lovely one to share between us, what we do for gratitude in school. Creative wellbeing is quite a kind of new concept for me. It's something that I thought about more recently. I think it was about a year or 2 ago. As adults, we've all got friends that are quite artistic, you know, that might paint occasionally or sing or do drama or different things. But more often than not, because of time constraints, most people I know in education, their creative things that they like to do are often put down to the very bottom of the list. I also find in school, art gets pushed to the bottom of the list at times because people have to get through all these objectives and academic subjects. So for me, creativity is a huge one for well-being. When you give blank paper and pens to a child, you know, they're more than happy to sit there. So I often think and say to my colleagues, you know, when's the last time you did that for yourself? A real sense of wellness can come from creativity. So when I thought about creative wellbeing, for me, it was combining them both. So I've got a set of creative wellbeing cards, which are just really kind of abstract concepts. Most of them are also rooted in positive psychology science, like this one. So this is a hope and optimism intervention. I can detail, again, I can share more about that, but it's basically a writing intervention where you write about your best life in the future. So I did this intervention a few years ago, and it was over 4 evenings. You sit for 20 minutes and write about your best life in the future. And that improves overall well-being in terms of optimism. So that's something else that can be done for well-being. But when you look at that in an artistic point of view, you know, how lovely would it, and it's not, you don't have to draw, you can visualize or paint something abstract or, you know, chat about it even, but how you might feel after taking part in that creative activity, you know, your well-being could improve by just talking about these things. So it does reignite a sense of play and flow, intertwining creativity and well-being elements and stepping into the experience. So when you've done those things for yourself and found a real bit of joy, and the other thing I always say to people is, you know, you don't need to be an artist. Anyone can be creative, and this is what we also need to step away from. Because when you feel that creative joy, how much more will you bring to that experience for the children? So on the next slide, yeah, these are the cards that I talked about. I'm so lucky that I get to try these things, ideas out with the children, because they just blow me away with the things they come up with. So for example, one of the cards is about draw a thought, which is a mindfulness concept. You know, the first thing the kids will say is, I can't draw a thought, I don't know what it looks like. And I say, but that's the whole point. You show me creatively. And the whole time we talk about what is a thought, how does that connect to mindfulness? What does that mean? You know, so you're also having a dialogue about something to do with improving their well-being while being creative. So again, it moves away from all art being the same, true creativity, but also when you think about how hard it is sometimes to implement well-being initiatives into a school or into a classroom, and you think about art in the same way, you know, sometimes they are kind of pushed down. So being able to combine both and bringing them into the session, you know, you're actually 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing, but you're just really opening up a creative space to talk about well-being. Okay, so I've got a few slides about mindfulness. I'm aware of time, I don't want to run over, but I just want to kind of briefly chat about mindfulness and meditation. I'm sure lots of you already have a mindfulness practice, or you've heard of it, or you've done some activities with the children. And there is so much literature out there, so many papers. I think later on I mentioned when I searched in May, there was over 500,000 pop-ups on Google for what mindfulness is, you know. So there's just, it's hard to find as well the right information that's scientifically correct, that resonates with you. Because again, we don't want to just give children saturated mindfulness and just throw things at them without actually knowing the value. So in a nutshell, mindfulness has got many strands, but it means living in the present moment, noticing, being aware of the here and now in a non-judgmental way. So very often, and myself included, when I started my mindfulness practice, I would sit there and the thoughts would come in like, oh, I've got dinner, I need to cook dinner in half an hour, I've got a report to write, don't have time for this, you know, but